Well, we've been talking about it. The 100th annual Pony Swim in Chincoteague is coming up on Wednesday. It's 100 years of fun and tradition and history. And we know that Chincoteague has inspired many different people over the years, and especially authors. We have an author joining us on the CoastLife Couch today. We've got Susan Friedland joining us. And Susan, you've written a book that was inspired by another book and a little bit of your own personal interest in horses as well. So maybe take us back a little bit to the beginning. Tell us about your book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, I was one of those horse crazy kids
Yep.
that the family didn't have enough money for a horse, and we lived in a suburban neighborhood. But I found my way to horses through the books of Marguerite Henry at my local library. And so when I was around 12, my parents met some people that had horses in the next town over called Wayne, Illinois. That's going to be important in a second. But anyway, so they said, you know, we have horses, have your daughter come out and ride. So without real formal lessons or anything, I just hopped on and went on the
Not
trail.
terrified at all, just brave and jumping
When you're
on.
12,
I
it's
guess,
easier,
yeah.
you know?
So anyway, there were trails and fields, open spaces specifically for riding. And I found out that Marguerite Henry, my favorite author, the author of Misty of Chincoteague, had lived there years earlier. So I thought that was really a cool point, like, oh my gosh, that's my favorite author. By this time, she was living in Southern California, and my path never crossed with her. But then flash forward to about 2018, I reread my childhood copy of Misty, fell in love all over again, and then I started thinking, like, maybe I could find her children or grandchildren. I knew she had passed in the 90s. And so what I thought would be maybe a blog post or a magazine article turned into a book.
So when people do get a hold of your book, Marguerite, Misty and Me, what are they going to find inside?
Well, there is a little bit of a summary of Misty of Chincoteague for people who are unfamiliar or if it's been many years. And they will uncover just kind of my adventure of getting to know who she was. At first, I thought I was writing a biography. You know, she was born in 1902, she died in 1997. But then I realized that the adventures I had, you know, the University of Minnesota has her personal papers. So I spent a couple weeks in archives, digging through boxes, and I found fan letters people had written to her from the 1960s, and I held her Newbery Medal for King of the Wind in my hand. And so I couldn't really talk about that if I was straightforward biography. So, you know, there's a part in there about me. And then obviously the climax of the story was I had never been to Chincoteague. I'm a Midwest girl. I understood that part of who Marguerite was as a Midwesterner herself, but so I watched my first pony swim 3 years ago from a kayak.
Nice.
By myself.
You got to be out there on the
Great
water.
spot.
I couldn't get anyone to come with me. So I'm like, well, I'm going for research. And so I went, and it turned out it was such a warm-hearted, as you know, joyful experience that I made
so
friends.
exciting.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything. It's kind of, part Marguerite Henry biography, part my memoir of seeking after my hero.
You've also kind of remained connected to Chincoteague. You've got some events coming up this week that are kind of bookending Pony Swim. Where can people, find you out and about?
Well, I would love to see people at the Museum of Chincoteague. So Tuesday night, I'm giving a talk at 6 p.m. and I think they probably should call the museum first just to make sure of the space. And then I'll be selling and signing books there. And then on Thursday, I'll be at the library, and then after the library, and that's at 1 on Thursday, at 2 we'll just walk down the street to Sundial Books, and we'll be doing a book signing there.
Perfect.
And there's a lot of happy endings to this because just writing a book, that's an accomplishment. On its own, it takes a tremendous amount of effort. But for the young you, the one that wanted a horse, you now have a horse.
I have a horse. Yay! Yeah, he's he's a former racehorse. He's a retired thoroughbred racehorse. His name is Tizza Knight, Knight with a K. I call him Knight.
Cute.
And he is a golden retriever in a tall, dark, and handsome gelding body. And he's my writing assistant. And Marguerite Henry, at the peak of her writing career, when she was writing Misty and Stormy and all of those books, when she would have a writing block, she would just go out in the backyard, hop on her horse. She had a black Morgan horse named Friday. she would take him for a spin and it would clear her head. And when I got in the weeds of not, knowing what my next chapter would be, I would go out and hop on my horse and, just have a little break from the tedium.
I love that story. I
Me
love that part of
too.
it, that is now in your life.
So, Susan, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your story, your inspiration, how we got to Marguerite, Misty, and Me, and lots of ways for you to get a hold of this book, especially this week if you are headed down to Chincoteague to enjoy the pony swim. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Coming up on CoastLife, though, when we get back, we still have just a little bit more to get to before we send Charlie downstairs for Coast TV News at 5. So a little more CoastLife coming at you.